Hi everyone, so welcome to this hobby desk, and this hobby desk is slightly different from anything I've done previously. I haven't done a how-to guide on how to make this Malanthrope. Didn't think anybody would be interested. It's obviously a custom build, a Kitbash that I have made. I didn't buy the Forge World model. I didn't think it was a bad model. I've had a couple of bad experiences with Forge World, and I don't think the price is astronomical. You know, if you get it directly from Forge World, it's probably cheaper than eBay at the moment. But that's just the way the world's working at the moment. So I made this guy up mostly from Nid bits, and I always thought the natural tail on the Forge World model is kind of cool. It's a bit squiggly, and you can see that it's part of the flight stand, and that's fine. I do like the shape of the tail, but I didn't like the way it was attached to the base. So when I made my own Malanthrope, what I wanted to do, have the classic curve of a tail, very much like the Gene Stealer coat kind of shape. So that's how I have made mine. But I made it up mainly because I knew I was having a game against the ever lovely Luke Workman and his glorious Blood Angels. Yes, I'm also a Blood Angels fan, you can probably tell, and I've used mine quite a bit before. But this time around, Luke wanted to use his Blood Angels, and he's never used his Blood Angels against my Nids. Yes, we've had them on the channel before, Blood Angels versus Nids, but never Luke's Blood Angels. So I thought that would be lovely. What do I want? So I made a list at the beginning of the week and realised, I really would like a Malanthrope. I don't have a Malanthrope. So once again, that was taken into consideration why I didn't get it from Forge World, because I didn't think it would get there in time and I would paint it up. So I had 5 days at the time to build a Malanthrope. What was I going to do? What was I going to use? So in this battle report, now forgive me, I don't know your full name. Just the person that put a comment on the channel is known as M. And M said, is there a guide to how to build that Malanthrope? Is the size comparable with the original model? That was the initial message, and that sparked off a few replies, things like that. So I thought, okay, as soon as you've asked, I will make a video. So it's a bit of a backwards video, because I'm going to start off at the beginning with the finished product, and then I'm going to put up some pictures and tell you how I made it, work through the pictures that way. But yes, I'm fairly happy with this, and yes, it is fairly similar to the size. The base size obviously is the same, and I wanted the main core of the body to be the same. I didn't want to look ridiculously different. You know, I know it has like little flutes on the back and things like that, and I thought, well, this guy, in my opinion, shouldn't have it, because that's what the Hive Guard and the Hive Tyrants and things like that have. Yeah, the Zoanthropes have it, but they also have a harder armor because they have that psychic invulnerable. So I always think something with an invulnerable or better armor should have it. So that's my initial thoughts when I was sketching it out, some blueprints. What would I include in this build? So I thought, yes, I like the armoured back, but without having the flutes. So I thought, what have I got in my bits box? Several bits boxes, I might add, over the years. So I've got a couple of Carnifex backs, and I thought, yeah, that's about the right size, about the right shape. So I stacked them up, thinking they look pretty cool, but I quickly realised, because they're all exactly the same shape, I couldn't overlap them so much, because obviously they're the exact same size and shape. So what I had to do was shave off a little bit of the inner edge, like the inside edge, that piece there underneath there, a little bit on the first one I placed underneath, and a bit more again on the one I placed underneath. So there's 3 Carnifex back deep, I guess you call it. Now there was the spore shooting one, the spine shooting one, the smooth one. I thought the smooth one was a bit too bland. That's just my personal preference. But that's what that is. That's Carnifex backs initially. And then I had a Morlock crest I stuck there as well, which I thought was pretty spiny. pretty cool to carry on, because I didn't want to just go straight into the squishy bits like the underbelly straight into the tail. I wanted a bit of a transition, so that's what I've done here. Carnifex backs, and I've done a bit of a curve so it looks a bit more natural, like it's leaning slightly and not completely dead upright. It would look a bit too wooden. And so I've gone smaller into that section there. So that was my main backbone, so to speak, no pun intended. So you can see in this picture here that I got the right kind of size, right kind of shape, and I wanted obviously a squid-like face. Now I know that the Gene Stealers have kind of like a Cthulhu face going on a couple of their models, a couple of the different head variants. So I went to try that, and I quickly realised the scale was well out. Didn't like it at all. So as you can see from this picture, I'm scaling up the size of a Carnifex head. So I've got the Carnifex back. Of course the head's going to go in perfectly. So I put that on, and I realise that on the back they have got this centre kind of bump that I never thought really looked right, especially if something's really hunched over. So I've removed the bump in the centre of the Carnifex back and shaved it down, made it a bit smoother. So this thing is going to be more of a C shape. That's my basic silhouette that I was aiming for. So I've shaved that off and made it a bit more of a C shape. Now, I got the right size head for this thing, but it needed like a squiddy face. I didn't really have a squiddy Carnifex face in my bits box, so I cut off its jaw, and then I was half tempted to use the spore mines. The plastic spore mines have a very good squiddy look to them, and I was thinking about cutting it off and gluing it on, but the squiddy like tentacles are quite well spaced, you know, because these spore mines drift across the battlefield, you know, so they're not going to be a tight knit group of tentacles. So what I could do is cut each tentacle off, make it a bit tighter knit possibly, or even heat it up slightly with a hot air gun or something, bend them together, and it does look more like a tentacle, and that looks great. But I was worried it was going to possibly melt it in the wrong place. It's a lot of work. So what I've done was, rather than tentacles, I've done more like a lobster face when they have their tentacles hanging out, and they're more like chitinous feelers. You know, they're not really tentacles, if you know what I mean. So as you can see in this picture, I have used the spines that you can have like jutting from a Tyranid warrior's chest, things like that. Cut that off individually and stuck them where the face used to be, the lower half of the face of my Carnifex head. So yeah, they're spiky, you know, they might not look too much like a tentacle, but they're more like a dreadlock face, and that's fine by me. If you wanted to, if you were going to build your own, use the spore mine, the tentacles on the back of the spore mines. Yeah, I would say go for it, purely because eventually I'll be using the top half of the spore mines, which I'll show you in a second. So on the next picture, you can see that I have the basic wire frame. So what I wanted to use was approximately 2mm, maybe 3mm wire to give it a decent, sturdy model. So this thing can support its own weight. It's not sagging in the slightest. It's a pretty solid wire. It's not soft like soldering wire or anything like that. It's a decent, thick wire. So I cut through part of the underbelly of one of the Carnifex shells, the backs, drilled a perfect hole to glue in there, and I've fixed it through to the Carnifex shells, Carnifex backs, because it's gone through two holes, better surface area to adhere to, and it's definitely solid. So you can see the bottom of the tail is actually another Tyranid piece. Now this actually comes from one of the old spore nodes. This thing. So obviously you can see I've cut it off and I've actually replaced it with something else. I always thought it was a bit too silly. It was jutting out, because I know 3 are the same length, 3 of the main spiny bits, and this bit here is, yeah, slightly longer. But I didn't want to use that because it's too much of a tip of a tail, and I wanted it a lot longer. And I know in this spawn, I assume it's I've never used it myself. I'm still fairly new into Tyranids. Now I know you can put those markers down for gene stealers, but I'm never really sure what this was for in game, or if it still actually has a place in 9th edition. But I wanted to keep it, so I have replaced it with a smaller part of a Malanthrope tail, I think it was. But once again, it's bits box, it's leftovers. You know, I never chuck anything away if I can help it. Same as my my terrain. Rule number 1: don't chuck anything away. So that's what I used specifically. But obviously, there's other tails out there that you guys can use in your own bits boxes that you may have, or even on bits sites or eBay. But this is what I used. I used this particular node, and it seemed to work okay. It looked quite nice. When I started green stuffing the tail later on, I did quickly realise that it looked out of place. It looked like it was just squishy tail, squishy tail, squishy tail, and then bam, armour, chitinous armour. So, talking to one of my hobby pals, Marcus, always has bright ideas in the hobby, and he said, how about you blend the tail in? So you blend the squishy part of the tail into like the underbelly of the armoured tip of the tail, then it would look more of a transition. So you got the spine on the back, but not all the way around. And he was right. So in this picture you can see I have green stuffed the tail, and I've started to do the belly. So for what I can only describe as the underbelly, the squishy section, I've actually used, as you can see, 2 spore nodes on either side. So like I said, I cut those tentacles off. I could have used those, but I thought they were a bit too wry. They kind of go everywhere, so that's why I used the closer clump of those spikes, those spines from its face. But I did clip one off and stick it on its back, and I thought, yeah, maybe I'll stick it there. So I used a couple of like the adrenal glands and stuff to stick underneath this thing to make it a bit more interesting rather than just a big hunk of green stuff. For the front arms, because on the Forge World model you've got slightly more longer arms on the front, so you've got one either side. The most front arms are the Hormigaunt slashing scythes. You know, I thought that was about the right size and shape. I mean, I had the Gene Stealer ones. Didn't look quite right. They looked a bit too big. So the Hormigaunt's a slightly smaller creature. So I thought I'll use those. Because the Forge World model is this hunched creature that has tiny little T-Rex arms. And then slightly bigger ones at the front. But they're still quite small in comparison to the model. And that's the look I wanted to give it. You know? So the 2 pairs either side at the back, what I've used is Malanthrope arms, because once again, raided my bits box, I had 2 Malanthrope, and why not? You know, bits box, it's great. You know, over the years you'll cut bits off sprue, just keep it to one side in a bits box. After a while you realise that tin has got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you need proper compartments to sort that out. I mean, I've been collecting Space Marines for 20 years maybe, and I've got trays of just shoulder pads, trays of backpacks, trays of right arms, trays of left arms. You get the picture. So always keep those bits. And Tyranids are no exception. You always get adrenal glands left over, things like that. Stick them on underneath. It looks a bit more interesting. So I wasn't massively happy after a while about the tiny little tentacle on its back, because there seems to be a bit of a gap in the armour. Normally where you get the little flutes sticking up between the plates of the Carnifex or Hive Tyrant, whatever it is. And the tentacle didn't look quite right. So once again, under Marcus's influence, he suggested, how about another Spore Mine node? So yeah, that's what I used. So in total I've got 3 Spore Mine nodes underneath this thing. So you can see now that this thing has 3 Spore Mine nodes underneath. on each side. There we go. And you can see the Hormigunt's arm and the Zoanthrope's arm. But the underbelly, if you can see, obviously I haven't painted the bottom side of my base. I don't know anybody that does, but if you do, good for you. I've had a load of these tiny pieces left over from various Tyranid kits in the past, like warriors and things like that. So what I've done is I've stuck them on top of each other to make a bit more of a spine, so a bit more like that, but all the same size, a bit more uniform, to have it on his, or its, her, whatever it is, kind of like the sternum, I guess, and either side the classic Tyranid kind of ribbed look that you can get from Carnifexes. That is all green stuff, and I've just used the cocktail stick to shape it. Giving it a bit of a ribcage kind of look, because that's what the Carnifexes normally have. And then there's normally a bit of a bump after that, and then the tail comes. So you can use the Carnifex chest if you have got one. That would be great. So you could use a Carnifex head, several spines, because you get so many different head variants and so many different back variants in a Carnifex kit. Why not? But you don't get many chests and bodies. Now you won't get that too much on eBay or part site either, because obviously people always want to convert, or they just buy the body because they've got a load of spines, like I said, and heads left over, and loads of extra arms. So why not make their own? So you'll find it quite hard. I found it hard when I was trying to make my own Zoanthropes, because I had different heads and backs left over, but there's never any bodies. So if you have access to a 3D printer, a resin 3D printer would be ideal. Make your own. You know, it's not like you're mass producing it and selling it out to the world. I don't think Games Workshop's going to mind too much. If they did a kit where it's just the bodies of Tyranids, I would buy the kit. I would. Because I've got a load of like warrior legs, backs, heads, arms. Same with my Carnifexes, my Hive Tyrant, things like that. If you just did the bodies, I would buy those. But at the moment, present time, they don't. So I green stuffed one, but it would be so much better if I had access to a resin printer, or if someone just had the body and I'd buy it off of them. But sadly, no one that I knew had one, so I made it from green stuff, which wasn't too bad. The tail in the Forge World model is quite smooth, apart from the occasional kind of like that kind of texture. And that's fine, but I didn't think it worked too well for this model. So I just put the classic 3 holes in the base of its tail, just with a cocktail stick, and worked it a little bit with the green stuff. And that's basically all I did. So this thing is, I would say, probably a third green stuff. So from the chest and the tail was green stuff. The head is Carnifex, the back is Carnifex. The spiky spines in its face, after I cut the jaw off and attached it to the uppermost part of its mouth, is from warriors. The front claws are from Hormigunt's. The back claws are from Zoanthropes. The poddy bits, they are from spore mines. And this, well, there's several different tail tips you can get. You can get the rattlesnake kind of tail from like the Morlock and things like that. But you can even get ones from the Carnifex or the Hive Tyrant, something like that. But this specifically came from that spawn node that I showed you. Now, I would imagine that's quite rare because I've never seen one before. I don't even know how old it is. I think it's somewhere in the 90s. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's what I use in this particular build. Hell, just to prove that I don't chuck anything away, this base, this resin base, is probably 20 years old anyway. Always wanted to use it and forgotten to use it a few times. Yeah, I got too much in the attic, I think. But for whatever reason, I don't know why, this crate that's burst open that had the artillery shells in didn't have the tips. So I made the tips from green stuff as well. That's just my base. Use whatever base you want. But I do recommend you base it the same as the rest of your army, because it's always nice to have an army with all the basing looking exactly the same. So my theme is just mud with a little bit of snow, a little bit of rock, and a few tufts just to break up a bit. And this is a paint scheme, which I use for 50% of the time Kraken, 50% of the time Kronos. I bought a few models off of a mate years and years ago, and he had a couple of them painted, and I liked the paint scheme, and I think it was, God knows how many years, 15 years ago, more, and I decided to carry on that scheme. So he had like 2 or 3 models, out of probably 1,000 that was painted, and I thought I would carry on. I liked the scheme. At the time, I liked red. I thought it was a great idea. This is before I played Blood Angels. I'm tired of painting red. But if I could do it over again, I would probably aim towards the coconut crab look. And there's a lot of tutorials out there on how to paint that. But this is just my custom that I've painted the same over the years. So basic black on the hide, dry brush with a grey, or sometimes like a very dark turquoise. And then I start with Mephiston red and get lighter and lighter as I get closer to the edges of the armour. And I'm fairly basic when it comes to the skin, like the squishy underbits like this. It's just a heavy coat of sepia over a nice tidy white prime. So especially over green stuff, you'll find that it looks quite dark, so you might have to put the extra coat of white over the top of it. But keep it smooth, keep it thin, because you do have those lovely details in there that you want to keep. So it's very basically painted, and then I just put a different couple of shades of pink over the squishy glandy bits. I know it doesn't look massively realistic, but I hit the top most part of it with a brighter pink from an airbrush, just to make it pop across the table, just so it shows up a bit better. And I find nothing will go amiss on a nid. You know, if you were fluorescent pink, if you're fluorescent green, blues, you name a colour, Tyranids always seem to work with it. I've seen like pearlescent, like colour changing shells before, like the carapaces. You know, that paint that you turn it at a different angle, may look purple, may look gold, may look green. It always seems to work. You know, paint it like tropical fish colours, like I mentioned briefly, coconut crab. All seems to work really well. So yeah, that's how I made my Malanthrope. I've probably rambled enough, but yeah, I would say most of the pieces were Carnifex, a little bit of the Morlock on the back there. But yeah, there's loads of different pieces that you guys could use to make your own one, rather than buying Forge World. But I don't dislike the Forge World model, and I do think it's a fairly reasonable price for Forge World. But on the table wise, it's 150 points. Is it really worth it? I'm not entirely sure, because if he's in close combat, you've done something wrong. He doesn't have any psychic. All it is you're paying for that 6-inch -1 to hit debuff. So when Nids get their new rules, will this guy change much? I don't know. But like I said, I had 5 days to build it. So it took me 5 days to make this thing up and paint it. I'm reasonably happy with it. So yeah, thank you for watching, guys. Please hit that like button. Feel free to comment and give me your thoughts on this thing. Am I an absolute monster for making my own models and not buying Forge World? I'm not slating Forge World. I think they're great. I just had a short time to do this. A bit like smoking the bandit. So here it is. Here's my Malanthrope. Thank you for watching.